Just a reminder on the beginning of the abnormal unit, as we judge behavior, that's not all that easy to do, but we remember the 3 Ds. The behavior has to be disturbing, deviant, and dysfunctional. So keeping in mind that they have to be maladaptive and interfere with everyday life. In terms of perspectives, it kind of takes us back to more of a chapter 1 type of thinking. The approach that you take sort of explains how you then explain each of the disorders. So remember that there's the biological model, which is more of a medical model, and it says that abnormal behavior has a biochemical or physiological basis. What that means is it's a sickness, it's an illness, it's something that can be treated. So think about it like you go to the doctor and you get medication, right? So it's just kind of that line of thinking. In terms of the diathesis stress model, that's just talking about how people that are already biologically or genetically predisposed to getting a disorder would tend to develop that disorder when they're exposed to ongoing stress. So just more of the environmental factor and how the nature and nurture can combine. Psychoanalytic model would say that abnormal behavior is a result of unconscious conflicts. Behavioral model would say that abnormal behavior is a result of faulty learning. Cognitive model says that it's a result of irrational or maladaptive ways of thinking. And then we know that we shouldn't really just take any one singular model. So at a minimum, we should really be using the BPS model. We should consider what biological influences, what psychological influences, and what sociocultural influences might combine to explain disorders that we see. This information is going to be different from in your book. Remember that we've updated to the DSM-5. So that's the Diagnostic and Statistic Manual of Mental Disorders, and it's extremely important for diagnosis and labeling, but remember, it does not suggest etiology or prescribed treatment. So what that means is it doesn't tell us where the disorders come from. It doesn't take any singular perspective in terms of saying it happens because of this or that, but instead, all it's trying to do is describe the disorder. That's important so that clinicians are able to more easily diagnose different disorders based on the criteria that are listed in the DSM, so that from one doctor to the next you would get a similar diagnosis. Remember that the Rosenhan study is one of those things that sort of warns us about the power of labeling. So remember, that's the study where people were admitted to a hospital, they complained of hearing voices, but other than that, they acted completely normally, but they were all misdiagnosed with disorders. So they were seen as having had disorders even though their only symptom was hearing voices. So that really helps demonstrate the power of stigmas and labels. From that we move into somatic symptom and related disorders. I just want to remind you guys again that this information that I'm giving you in the video is different from what's in your book. So don't review your book because this stuff has been updated. So the category is somatic symptom and related disorders. One of the main disorders that you'd have to know as part of this is called somatic symptom disorder. So it's the experience of physical symptoms for which there is no apparent physical basis. Somatic means bodily. So when we talk about somatic symptom disorder, what we're talking about is people who are experiencing issues. It might be hand paralysis, or it might be back pain, or it might be I don't know, ongoing pains in your head or something like that. But when doctors look, when they check your blood, when they scan your brain, when they do all of those things, they can find no reason why it's happening. But you're not faking it, okay? So the symptoms are taking a bodily form, but there's a psychological problem that is kind of like forcing out those symptoms in bodily form, okay? Another example then, a more specific example, something that you're probably more likely to see under this category is conversion disorder, and that is a specific and dramatic physical disability for which no medical cause can be found. So for example, something as extreme as blindness or paralysis. Usually conversion disorder is an indication of a neurological condition. So something happens, maybe you see something terrible, you see a car accident or something like that, and then you're experiencing blindness following that. You go to the doctor, they scan you, they do all the tests. You are in fact blind, but there's no biological reason that they can find for why you're blind. So again, that would just be an example of it being somatic, a manifestation of a psychological problem, but with a physiological or bodily symptom. Okay, and then the final one is illness anxiety disorder. This used to be called hypochondriasis. So when people are like, oh, you're such a hypochondriac, this is kind of the updated category name. So it's small and insignificant symptoms that are interpreted as signs of a serious illness. Usually people in this category are overly focused on the fear of disease and not the actual symptoms. So maybe you're having ongoing pain in your head or something like that, and you think, oh, I have to have a brain tumor, and so you are really worried that you have that, and you keep trying to go to the doctor to treat that. But again, there's no physical basis. Another category then are dissociative disorders. And a dissociative disorder is a disorder where some aspect of your personality or your memory, thoughts, or feelings become separated or fragmented from the rest. So to dissociate is sort of to like break away. All right, so that's kind of the general explanation of the category itself. There are really only two that you might need to know. Dissociative amnesia, and that says selective memory loss often brought on by severe stress. Fugue is a type of memory loss related to personal information, like who you are or where you live. So that's just like a word to know. With dissociative amnesia, when we talk about selective memory loss brought on by stress, maybe you can't remember the birth of your child, or you can't remember college graduation, you can't remember the day you got married, things like that, where you lose some part of your memory. And then fugue would be much bigger than that. So personal information like who you are, where you live, you wake up one day and you're sort of like, why am I here? What's going on? You might even up and move somewhere else and get a new job and start a new life. Now, usually, these memories come back. Dissociative identity disorder, this used to be called multiple personality disorder, so it's what we think of when we think of that. So this is where more than one personality seems to be present in a single individual. These are known as alters. So there are pros and, well, not pros and cons, but there's confirming and disconfirming evidence to DID. Remember that in your book when you read about it, or in class when we talked about it, we talked about how DID tends to be mainly a North American disorder. So there are several countries, the majority of countries, that have no diagnosed cases of DID at all, which suggests that that maybe it's something that isn't as prevalent or isn't as real, possibly. So there are things like that, but then on the flip side of that, we also know that when people are studied, oftentimes people with alters, they exhibit different patterns and responses, like different speech patterns, different breathing rates, just overall different biological responses when they're being tested. So some evidence to confirm DID there, but it is controversial.